Do you know what hantavirus is? I'm sure you don't want to know. May 2026. The expedition cruise ship MV Hondius is slicing through the cold waters of the South Atlantic, returning from the frozen shores of Antarctica. On board are 380 passengers and crew members, scientists, tourists, photographers, all captivated by the icy landscapes and the profound silence. No one suspects that deep inside the ventilation shafts, in the dust of the cabins, and in the tiny particles stirred up from the floor of one particular cabin, a deadly enemy is already lying in wait. Just 3 days after leaving the port of Ushuaia, the first passenger wakes up with a high fever and excruciating muscle pain, as if his body is being twisted from the inside out. By evening, 7 more fall ill. By morning, 30. The ship's doctors are in panic. A laboratory in Chile confirms it. This is not the flu. This is a new, highly aggressive strain of hantavirus, the one the world now simply calls Hantavirus 2026. In the following weeks and months, it broke free from the ship. From Chile and Argentina, it spread to Spain, the United Kingdom, the United States, Russia, and beyond. In some hotspots, the number of infections doubled every 2 to 3 days. A world that had barely recovered from previous pandemics held its breath once again. What exactly happens when this virus enters a human body? And what must we all do to prevent disaster? A virus is nothing more than a tiny package, a protein shell surrounding several segments of RNA, its genetic material. It cannot truly be called a living organism. It has no metabolism, no independent movement, and cannot reproduce on its own. Hantavirus can only live and multiply inside another living cell. It is remarkably stable in the environment, in dried rodent urine and droppings, in household dust, inside old houses, ship cabins, barns, and forest huts. It can remain infectious for weeks or even months under the right conditions. In 2026, this new strain gained an additional and extremely dangerous ability: limited person-to-person transmission during close, prolonged contact. Through respiratory droplets from coughing, talking, or in poorly ventilated spaces. But the primary route of infection remains classic for hantaviruses: inhaling tiny, aerosolized particles that become airborne when rodent droppings or nesting materials are disturbed. Sometimes all it takes is sweeping the floor in an old house, cleaning ventilation ducts, or pitching a tent in a place where rodents once lived. The virus begins its journey in the lungs. It works its way deeper into the body. Its main target is not the surface lining, but the endothelium, the incredibly thin layer of cells that lines the inside of all your blood vessels. This is where it can deliver its most devastating blow. Even a small number of viral particles can trigger a truly dramatic chain of events. Imagine the lungs, billions of tiny air sacs, called alveoli, wrapped in a dense network of capillaries. The endothelial cells here act as the body's border guards. They carefully control what can pass through the vessel walls and what cannot. Hantavirus knows exactly where to attach. It binds to beta-3 integrin receptors on the surface of these cells like a perfect key in a lock. Once inside, the unsuspecting host cell begins following the virus's new instructions, its RNA. The cell turns into a full-scale virus factory. It copies the genetic material, produces the envelope proteins GN and GC, the nucleocapsid protein N, and the polymerase. New viral particles are assembled inside and then bud out of the cell. The number of infected cells grows exponentially. 1 to 2 weeks after infection, the incubation period can range from 1 to 8 weeks. Millions of cells in the lungs and other organs are already working for the virus. Billions of new viral particles flood into the bloodstream. At this stage, the person may still feel relatively normal, just mild weakness, fever, and muscle aches, while inside a full-scale occupation is underway. And this is when the virus unleashes its most terrifying weapon, your own immune system. The immune system is not just a shield, it is a powerful, highly trained army that, if poorly commanded, can become far more dangerous than the enemy itself. It requires strict coordination and control. As soon as immune cells, macrophages, neutrophils and T killers approach the damaged blood vessels in the lungs, the hantavirus begins infecting them too, sowing complete chaos in the ranks. Cells communicate with each other through tiny protein messengers called cytokines, like radio signals on a battlefield. The hantavirus forces the infected cells to scream in panic, "Emergency! Full mobilization! Everyone to the front!" And the army responds, in overwhelming numbers. Far too many. First come the neutrophils, the suicide soldiers of the immune system. They release nets made of their own DNA, neutrophil extracellular traps or nets, enzymes, and reactive oxygen species. These weapons destroy not only the virus, but also healthy endothelial cells. The blood vessels become leaky, like old, damaged pipes. Fluid begins pouring out of the bloodstream into the lung tissue. Then the cytotoxic T killers arrive. Normally, they carefully order infected cells to commit controlled suicide through apoptosis. But in this chaos, they begin attacking healthy cells as well. Levels of cytokines, TNF-alpha, IL-6, IL-1-beta, IFN-gamma skyrocket. This is the infamous cytokine storm, which is especially destructive in hantavirus cardiopulmonary syndrome. The lungs fill with fluid. The alveoli drown. Oxygen can no longer enter the blood. The person starts to suffocate. The heart works overtime, trying to push blood through the swollen lungs. Blood pressure drops. Kidney failure may follow. The patient feels as if a heavy stone is crushing their chest. Every breath becomes a struggle. Cold sweat covers the body. Consciousness begins to fade. In most cases, the immune system eventually regains control. It kills the infected cells, stops the virus from spreading further, and begins cleaning up the battlefield. Recovery starts. Slow, painful, and often requiring medical support, oxygen, and in severe cases, mechanical ventilation. Most people infected with Hantavirus 2026 initially experience symptoms that feel like a very severe flu. High fever, intense muscle pain, especially in the back and thighs, as if you've been beaten with sticks, headache, chills, nausea, vomiting, and sometimes diarrhea. This is the prodromal phase, the first 3 to 5 days. Many think it will pass. But then the cardiopulmonary phase hits suddenly, and that's when things become truly terrifying. In severe cases, the lungs literally fill with fluid. Patients require intubation and mechanical ventilation. Some die from hypoxia, heart failure, or secondary bacterial infections. The fatality rate in severe forms of Hantavirus 2026 can reach 30 to 40%. We don't yet have exact figures for the entire outbreak, it's still too early, but one thing is already clear. This virus is significantly more dangerous than seasonal flu. Hantavirus is often compared to the flu or even early coronaviruses, but it is far more insidious. While flu mainly attacks the epithelial lining of the respiratory tract, hantavirus strikes directly at the blood vessels, at the very circulatory system itself. It doesn't just cause inflammation, it breaks down the body's internal barriers from within. Right now, we face two possible scenarios for how this plays out: the fast scenario and the slow scenario. The fast scenario is a nightmare. If we do nothing, if people continue to ignore precautions, if the virus spreads as rapidly as it did on that cruise ship, then within weeks, hundreds of thousands and later millions of people could fall seriously ill at the same time. Hospitals will be overwhelmed. There won't be enough beds, ventilators, or trained staff. Doctors and nurses will get sick themselves. Triage decisions will have to be made. Heartbreaking choices about who gets a ventilator and who doesn't. The death toll will skyrocket. Economies will stall. Fear and panic will paralyze cities. The slow scenario is what happens when we act now, when every single one of us understands our responsibility, when we manage to stretch out the outbreak over time. Then healthcare systems can cope. Scientists gain precious time to develop vaccines and treatments. The number of severe cases remains manageable. This pandemic goes down in history not as a catastrophe, but as another challenge that humanity faced and overcame together. To make the slow scenario a reality, the entire world, meaning every one of us, must do what it takes to slow the spread. Since we don't yet have a universal vaccine, although research is moving at full speed, we ourselves must become the social shield. It starts with something simple yet incredibly effective: hygiene and rodent control. Soap and alcohol-based disinfectants are powerful weapons against Hantavirus. The virus hides inside a lipid envelope. Soap dissolves that fat layer like hot water dissolves grease on a pan. The virus loses its ability to infect. Wash your hands thoroughly for at least 20 seconds after any contact with potentially contaminated surfaces, especially after cleaning, gardening, visiting old buildings, or camping. When cleaning areas where rodents may have been, follow strict safety protocols. Wear an N95 mask or at least a well-fitting medical mask. Put on gloves. Never vacuum dry. This spreads aerosol particles. Thoroughly wet all surfaces with disinfectant, bleach or alcohol solutions. Ventilate the area well. Store food and trash in sealed containers and seal cracks in homes. Social distancing also matters. Avoid crowded, poorly ventilated indoor spaces. Reduce unnecessary close contact. If you can work or study from home, do it. Protect those who cannot. Healthcare workers, store clerks, public transport drivers, cleaners, and police officers. Whether they get sick may depend on you. Quarantine and contact isolation are not punishments. They are a gift of time for science, for hospitals, and for all of us. If you're asked to stay home, do it. It's not forever. It's a few weeks that could save thousands of lives. None of this is fun. No one enjoys wearing masks, cancelling trips, or living in a heightened state of caution. But when you look at the bigger picture, it's a small price to pay compared to overflowing intensive care units, losing loved ones, or facing a long and difficult recovery. The ending of the Hantavirus 2026 story is being written right now, in these very days, in your hands. Literally, when you wash your hands, put on a mask while cleaning, and keep your distance. And figuratively, when you support science, trust experts, and care for your neighbors and those who must continue working. The virus cannot win if we don't give it the chance. Humanity has already survived the plague, the Spanish flu, and COVID. We have been through wars and crises. We are smarter than we think. We are stronger when we act together. In May 2026, As the world once again stands at the threshold, we have a choice. We can choose fear, or we can choose responsibility. We can choose the fast scenario or the slow one. We can choose life. It really is in our hands. Let's make the right choice together.